All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to unpack the absolutely epic story of how the United States became an economic superpower. And really, it's a story of radical, ground shaking transformations that didn't just redefine a nation, they redefined the entire world.
So, let's kick things off with a big question that really frames this whole story. I mean, how did we get from there to here? From a bunch of scattered agricultural colonies on the edge of a continent to the dominant economic force on the planet? Well, the answer isn't one simple thing. It's a series of dramatic, total reinventions. And the clues were there from the very beginning. This number, it's pretty fascinating. It shows that even before the US was officially a country, between 1700 and 1774, the economic output of the 13 colonies shot up 12-fold. That's not just steady growth, folks. That is a sign of some seriously explosive potential, just coiled up and waiting to be unleashed. Okay, so to make sense of this massive journey, we're going to break it down into 4 great transformations. We'll start with how it all began, with land, labor, and a new nation. Then we'll jump into the first industrial revolution, powered by steam. After that, it's the age of steel and just massive scale. And finally, we'll get to the service and digital economy that we're all living in today. And then, of course, we'll ask, what's next? So, let's dive in.
So, our first era here is all about laying the groundwork. You got to think of the United States from the late 1700s to about 1840 as less of a single unified economy and more like a collection of bold experiments. But these experiments, they created the essential foundation for everything, and I mean everything that came after. What's so crucial here is how all these pieces just clicked into place. First, the Constitution in 1787 creates this huge common market by getting rid of all the annoying taxes and tariffs between states. Then, the First Bank of the U.S. gives it a national financial system to work with, and then, boom, you get the technological sparks. Eli Whitney's cotton gin turns Southern cotton into a global powerhouse commodity, and at the same time, Slater's mill basically kicks off mechanized manufacturing in America by, well, borrowing some British factory designs. And this table right here, it just brilliantly illustrates where the country stood by 1840. Just look at that top line. Agriculture employed almost 70% of the population. 70%! And it produced nearly half the country's output. At its heart, the U.S. was still, fundamentally, a nation of farmers. Now, I want you to burn these numbers into your brain because we are about to see them change in the most dramatic way possible. All right, let's move on. This is where we see the first great transformation really kick into high gear, the age of steam and factories. This is the moment the country truly starts to pivot from the farm to the factory floor, a shift powered by some incredible new tech that was about to make a vast continent feel a whole lot smaller. This quote from 1816, man, it just perfectly captures the single biggest problem America had: distance. The country was absolutely enormous, but moving anything over land was just ridiculously, insanely expensive. For this economy to ever truly take off, America had to solve its transportation problem. And boy, did they solve it. It happened in this breathtaking 1-2-3 punch of innovation. First up, you get canals, like the game-changing Erie Canal, creating a water highway deep into the interior. Then steamboats come along and totally tame the mighty rivers, suddenly allowing goods to flow not just downstream, but upstream too. And finally, the very first railroads start stitching the nation together with iron, setting the stage for an even bigger explosion to come. Now, here's the thing. The real secret sauce here wasn't just the factories themselves, but the big idea behind them, a whole new philosophy, the American system of manufacturing. It actually started in government armories to make guns, of all things, but the revolutionary idea was using machines to make identical, interchangeable parts. That simple idea was the key that unlocked mass production for pretty much everything. Okay, this brings us to our third transformation. And if you thought the first one was big, this one was maybe even more explosive. The era of steel and scale. If the first industrial revolution was about steam and textiles, this second one was all about heavy industry, massive corporations, and world-changing inventions that literally built the modern America we'd recognize today. Just look at the growth on this chart. It's staggering. In just 30 years, the miles of railroad track in the U.S. more than quadrupled. And this wasn't just about more tracks. This was the creation of a true high-speed national market where goods and people could zip from coast to coast with a speed and ease that was just unimaginable a generation earlier. So what made that incredible railroad explosion possible? Well, you can boil it down to one thing: cheap steel. The new Bessemer process completely revolutionized how steel was made, making it both incredibly strong and incredibly affordable. And this wasn't just for rails. This was the steel that built the first skyscrapers, the massive bridges, the very machines that defined this new industrial age. And the pace of innovation, it was just dizzying. The telegraph and then the telephone completely conquered communication. The electric light bulb literally turned night into day. The first automobiles started sputtering down dirt roads. And, just as important, a whole new kind of invention came along: modern business management, which was needed to actually control the gigantic new corporations that were running all these industries. Life was just fundamentally changing year by year. So that brings us to our fourth great transformation. And this is the one that has really shaped the world that most of us have grown up in. Starting around the 1950s, after World War II, the economy began this monumental shift away from making physical things and toward providing services, processing information, and of course, embracing the digital revolution. Now, this shows you the sheer scale of that change. Hey, remember that chart from 1840 where 68% of Americans worked in agriculture? Okay, now look at this. Today, that number is about 1%. One! And the service sector, it's completely exploded. It now employs roughly 80% of the entire workforce. This is, without a doubt, the single greatest economic shift in American history laid bare in one chart. And you can really see the shift in what was driving the growth. Back in the mid-20th century, growth was all about massive physical projects: the interstate highway system, the aircraft industry, building suburbs. But by the time we get to the late 20th and early 21st century, the drivers become almost invisible, intangible. Things like computer technology, globalization, the complex world of finance, and of course, the rise of the platform economy, all powered by the internet. And that brings us to today. We've journeyed through these massive economic reinventions, from the farm to the factory, from steel to services, which leaves us with one final and really crucial question. The entire history of the U.S. economy is a story of radical, constant change. It never stands still. The source material we looked at points to huge trends like the rise of artificial intelligence as a potential driver for the next big shift. So the question I want to leave you with is this: now that you've seen the patterns of the past, what do you think the fifth great transformation of the American economy is going to be?